October 4th, 1997, Charlotte, North Carolina. It is a Saturday evening, and most people in this mid-sized southern city are thinking about football scores, dinner plans, or putting their kids to bed. Nobody is thinking about the regional vault of Loomis, Fargo, and company sitting quietly on the edge of town, loaded with $17.3 million in cold, untraceable cash. Nobody except David Scott Gaunt. Gaunt is 28 years old, a vault supervisor at one of America's largest armored transport companies, the kind of guy who shows up on time, follows the rules, and knows exactly where every dollar is stored. He is trusted with the kind of access most people never get near in their entire lives. He has the codes, he has the keys, he has the plan. And on this particular Saturday night, he has already sent his coworker home early, reportedly around 6 p.m., using some excuse that sounded routine enough not to raise any flags. With the building to himself, Gaunt begins doing something he has spent weeks preparing for. He starts loading $17.3 million in cash into the back of a company van. The money fills cube after cube, most of it in $20 bills, the kind of denomination that takes up enormous physical space. What looks like a fortune in the abstract becomes something overwhelming, almost comically massive in the real world. Gaunt loads it piece by piece into the van, and the security camera overhead captures all of it, every single minute of it, for over an hour. He either doesn't know the cameras are running, or he doesn't care. That footage will matter later. Outside, waiting in the dark, are Kelly Campbell, his former Loomis coworker, and the woman he is romantically involved with, along with a man named Steve Chambers, a one-time FBI informant who had dreamed up this whole scheme the summer before. The group moves the money from the company van to private vehicles at a printing business called Reynolds & Reynolds in Northwest Charlotte. Then Gaunt takes $50,000 in cash, the legal maximum one can carry across the Mexican border without triggering federal reporting requirements, and disappears. He boards a flight heading south, destination, the resort island of Cozumel on the Yucatan Peninsula. The plan, as far as Gaunt understands it, is simple. He hides in Mexico, Chambers holds the money, and when the heat dies down, everyone splits the fortune equally. What Gaunt does not know, what he cannot know yet, is that the plan was never meant to work out that way for him. Here is the thing about stealing $17.3 million. It only works if nobody finds out you have it. That sounds obvious. It is obvious. And yet, almost immediately, the people left behind in Charlotte began behaving in ways that made the FBI's job almost embarrassingly easy. Steve Chambers and his wife Michelle had been living in a mobile home in Lincoln County, the kind of modest, unassuming life that doesn't attract attention from federal investigators. Within weeks of the robbery, they moved into a luxury house in the wealthy Kramer Mountain section of Kramerton. They kept furniture from the previous owners, including, of all things, a velvet painting of Elvis Presley. They bought a BMW Z3 with cash. They spent money on a $600 carved cigar store Indian. None of this was subtle. None of this was the behavior of people who understood that the FBI investigates large cash robberies with considerable focus and persistence. Kelly Campbell, who had orchestrated Gaunt's introduction to Chambers in the first place, used part of her share to buy a Toyota Sienna minivan, not in one transaction, but in 2 cash installments, as if splitting it up would somehow make it invisible. It did not. Meanwhile, other friends and relatives who had co-signed for safe deposit boxes used to store portions of the cash were quietly drawing attention to themselves without even fully realizing the risk they had accepted. The FBI had been called into the case almost immediately. When Loomis Fargo employees showed up on the morning of October 5th and couldn't open the vault, they called local police. The police called the FBI because most of the money in that vault belonged to banks, which made the theft a federal bank robbery, not just a property crime. Within hours, investigators were looking at the surveillance footage and watching Gaunt load cube after cube of cash into that van. He was the only employee unaccounted for. His pickup truck was found abandoned at the warehouse. Inside it, investigators found something small but telling: his wedding ring, left behind like a declaration. Gaunt was not planning to come back. Connecting Gaunt to Campbell was relatively straightforward. The two had worked together, and their relationship was known. Connecting Gaunt to Chambers took longer, but the gang's spending habits were carving a road straight to their front door. Tips started rolling in from neighbors, from businesses, from people who noticed things that didn't add up. Then came the moment that sealed it. Michelle Chambers walked into a bank and made a large deposit. She had previously been making small, frequent deposits to stay below reporting thresholds, a practice that was itself suspicious. But on this visit, she turned to a teller and asked, calmly and apparently without irony, "How much can I deposit before you have to report it to the feds?" And then, perhaps sensing something in the teller's expression, she added, "Don't worry, it's not drug money." The bank filled out a suspicious activity report before she even left the building. While Charlotte quietly imploded behind him, David Gaunt was living the early chapters of what he had imagined would be a new life. He checked into a luxury hotel in Cozumel, ate expensive meals, went scuba diving, went parasailing, and spent his $50,000 with the relaxed confidence of someone who believed much more was on its way. He was waiting for Chambers to wire him funds, as promised. He was waiting for the coast to clear. He was waiting for his share. What was actually happening back in North Carolina was that Chambers had decided Gaunt was a liability he couldn't afford. Gaunt was the only person who could directly implicate Chambers in the robbery, the only person with direct knowledge of the full plan. At some point, Chambers arranged what investigators would later describe as a murder-for-hire scheme, enlisting a man named Michael McKinney to travel to Mexico and kill Gaunt. The FBI learned of this plot as their surveillance of Chambers deepened, and it transformed the investigation from a financial crime case into something with much higher and more urgent stakes. In Mexico, Gaunt was growing nervous. His money was running out. Chambers sent him just $8,000, a fraction of what had been promised, and Gaunt curtailed his spending, moved to cheaper accommodations, and started taking precautions. He shaved his face to change his appearance, and he tried to stay low. At one point, a stranger at a restaurant looked at him and said with casual directness that he looked like the man who robbed a bank of $20 million. Gaunt laughed it off. He changed his hair. He kept moving. The FBI, working in coordination with Mexican authorities, had been tracing his phone calls. When Gaunt called Chambers from Mexico, investigators were listening. That call made the final connection, and it confirmed both where Gaunt was and what Chambers had been planning to do to him. The FBI moved quickly. On March 1st, 1998, 5 months after the robbery, agents coordinated with Mexican police and arrested David Scott Gaunt at Playa del Carmen, a coastal city near Cancun. The next day, back in Charlotte, Steve Chambers, Michelle Chambers, Kelly Campbell, and 4 other co-conspirators were arrested in a series of coordinated takedowns. On March 12, 1998, a Charlotte grand jury handed down indictments for all 8 core co-conspirators on charges of bank larceny and money laundering. The money laundering charge was specific and deliberate. It wasn't just about taking the cash, but about how they spent it. 9 additional relatives and friends were charged because they had co-signed for the safe deposit boxes used to store portions of the stolen funds. Prosecutors argued that they should have known the money was obtained illegally, and 4 more people were ultimately charged on similar grounds. 24 people in total were eventually convicted in connection with the robbery. All but one of the defendants pleaded guilty. The exception was Jeff Guller, an attorney who had represented Chambers and was charged with money laundering. Guller went to trial, was found guilty, and received 8 years in federal prison. Among those who pleaded guilty, sentences ranged from probation for those involved only at the periphery, the safe deposit box co-signers, to 11 years and 3 months for Steve Chambers, who was also ordered to pay more than $3.5 million in fines. David Gaunt, the man who actually walked into that vault and loaded the van, received 7 years in federal prison and a $26,000 fine. He was released in 2006, Michelle Chambers received 7 years and 8 months, slightly more than Gaunt, because she had violated multiple bond conditions during the legal process. Kelly Campbell's sentence fell somewhere in between. For a while, Charlotte couldn't stop talking about the case. The defendants became the subject of jokes across the country, and the robbery was widely nicknamed the Hillbilly Heist, a nickname that stuck not because it was particularly fair, but because it captured something the public found hard to look away from: the image of ordinary people from small towns around Charlotte suddenly swimming in more money than they had ever dreamed of and drowning in it almost immediately. The FBI eventually confirmed that more than 88% of the stolen cash had been recovered or accounted for. To this day, more than $2 million remains missing. In November 2006, Steve Chambers finished serving his sentence and walked out of federal prison. In February 2009, the Associated Press reported that he described himself as a changed man. Whether that is true, and what it means, is something only Chambers knows. Gaunt, meanwhile, has written a book, published in 2018, called The Book of Dave, A New Path After a $17 million Misstep, about the mindset that led him to that vault on October 4th, 1997, and the long, quiet work of becoming someone different on the other side of it. The robbery has been recreated for television, analyzed in documentaries, and turned into a 2016 comedy film called Masterminds, with Zach Galifianakis playing Gaunt and Owen Wilson playing Chambers, a casting choice that somehow feels exactly right. But here is what stays with you, long after the jokes and the headlines and the movie credits roll. This was not a story about a criminal mastermind. This was not a story about careful planning, flawless execution, or any of the things heist movies romanticize. This was a story about a man who was trusted completely, trusted with more cash than most people will ever see in their lifetime, and who allowed that trust to be used against him by people who needed him to believe they cared about him while they were quietly arranging his death. The real theft in this story was not the $17.3 million. The money was mostly recovered. The real theft was something harder to put a price on: the way Gaunt's genuine feelings for Kelly Campbell were converted into a tool, the way his desperation for something more was channeled into a plan that was never going to work in his favor, the way Chambers looked at a man who trusted him and saw only an asset with an expiration date. Gaunt took the fall, carried the risk, did the act, and was then sent to a resort island to die quietly, while the people he trusted bought velvet Elvis paintings and asked bank tellers how to hide money from the government. There is something in this story that goes beyond the facts of cash and cameras and courtrooms. It is the old truth that most people who destroy themselves do not do it alone. They do it with help from someone they believed was on their side. The vault was easy to open. Gaunt had the keys. What he didn't have, and what no key in the world can unlock, was a way to see clearly the moment trust becomes a trap. That moment came and went on a Saturday evening in October 1997, in a building in Charlotte, North Carolina, while the camera ran and the world had no idea what was being lost.